Good afternoon. Today, we have the incredible fortune to screen a segment from the upcoming series from National Geographic and Disney+, A Small Light, which is premiering tomorrow. A Small Light is based on the harrowing and inspiring true story of the Gies and Frank families during the Nazi occupation in Amsterdam. Miep Gies, played by Belle Powley, was young, carefree, and opinionated at a time when opinions got you killed, when Otto Frank, portrayed by Liev Schreiber, asked her to help hide his family from the Nazis during World War II. Told with a modern sensibility, A Small Light shakes the cobwebs off history and makes Miep's story more relevant than ever in the face of today's rising anti-Semitism, forcing audiences to ask themselves what they would have done in Miep's shoes and if they would have the same courage to fight against hatred today. I had the honor of attending the New York City premiere last week, for which ADL was a partner, and can attest to the power and relevance of the show. We are extremely grateful to National Geographic and Disney+ for creating the opportunity for this exclusive screening today. Following the screening, I am thrilled that we will be joined by lead actress Belle Powley and executive producers and the show's creators Tony Phelan and Joan for a panel discussion led by Jonathan Greenblatt. And now, please enjoy A Small Light.
It's great to see you here, and welcome to Washington, D.C. and our National Leadership Summit. I am so thrilled to be here this afternoon, joined by Belle Powley, who, as you saw, so powerfully and authentically plays Miep Gies, along with the show's creators, writers, and executive producers, Tony Phelan and Joan. A Small Light is an incredible, powerful, and poignant, and just resonant series. And I just need to say, even before we get started, the gratitude, I think I speak for everyone at ADL, everyone in the Jewish community, just thank you for making this and making Miep's story, which is a story that we all don't know, accessible and available to a new generation. So thank you for what you've done. So Tony, why don't we start with you? So what inspired you? Where did it come from, this spark, to make this series?
Well, Joan and I are married, and we have known about Miep. There was a documentary made back in the 90s called Anne Frank Remembered that is loosely based on her memoir, and she made this kind of famous appearance at the Academy Awards, this little tiny Dutch woman. And so that kind of struck us, and probably about 7 years ago, we took our kids to the Anne Frank house. We were going through the museum, and we were reading this plaque about Miep, and it was talking about how when she first met Otto and started working for him, she was in her early 20s. And we turned and looked at our son, who was also in his early 20s. Our son is a wonderful child. He is intelligent.
Oh boy.
But the prospect of him saving anyone's life is just absurd.
But we realized suddenly that Miep was ill-prepared as well. You know, she was just an ordinary person who said yes. Oh, you didn't get to see the scene. There's a really good scene. You'll watch it when it comes on TV. But there's the great scene when Otto Frank asks if she'll help hide his family, and she says yes, immediately. And he says, Miep, you need to take some time and think about it. And she says, no, I don't. And she just said yes. She said, and then but I fully believe she had no idea what she was saying yes to. How could she? And what makes her so extraordinary is that she kept saying yes day after day when it got hard, when she was sick, you know, when it was dangerous, she kept saying yes. And so suddenly we wanted to tell the human story, not of the hero, but of the person who said yes and then dealt with it and continued to say yes. And we wanted to look at all the aspects of it, not just the sort of heroism, but
I think the other thing is that there is a tendency, and it certainly happened with Anne's story, to put those people in amber, and I think what that does is it distances us from them. And this series is an attempt to kind of clear the cobwebs away and make those people more immediate to the audience and more relatable. And so that you can feel the empathy and ask yourself, ideally, throughout the series, what would I do? Would I be able to do that?
Well, if I might, Tony, that's a good segue, because I think one of the things that I found interesting was the story behind the title. Like, why a small light? And I know that that phrase is taken from a quote that Miep said, and I'll read it. Late in life, she said, "I don't like being called a hero because no one should ever think you have to be special to help others. Even an ordinary secretary or a housewife or a teenager can turn on a small light in a dark room." And that is so aligned with the ADL message that we're talking about here over these next few days. Can you share a little bit about your thoughts on the title and this capability that every one of us have?
Well, it's one of those things that as you're reading about her is so true, in that her heroism came from bringing food and bringing hope and news every day. When you think about it, those people in that annex were totally cut off from everyone. So Miep and Jan and the other helpers were their only source. And I think in our own way, in a very small way during pandemic, we can relate to that. Being in a situation where you don't know what the future is, you don't know how long this lockdown is going to last, and it's terrifying. And so to have that person who was there, and as Joan said, constantly says yes. And I think if young people take something from the show, ideally it would be the idea that it's in these little everyday decisions that you can make a difference.
So Belle, let me turn it to you. So, I mean, you're an incredible talent. You've got your choice of so many projects. What made you want to be part of this series in particular?
So many things. I'm Jewish myself, so, I feel connected to this part of history. My grandmother died during the pandemic, and she was a very important figure in my life. And the offer for this actually came into me on Holocaust Memorial Day. So before I'd even read it, I knew this is something that would be very special to me and my family. Yeah. My grandma would be so proud. But also, I do think that this is a part of history that's been explored a lot in film and television. So I was like, it needs to be different. And like you say, it needs to be accessible and available to young people. And I was so blown away when I read the pilot at how relatable I found the character of Miep. Also, how pleased I was that Tony and Joan have decided to, I always say, we don't speak in olden day language in the show. It has this kind of modern edge. Yeah. Which I think is really important, because it does immediately make you think, what would I do? It immediately makes you think about the parallels to our world today, and it isn't this kind of dusty, sepia-toned version of this story that we do all know very well. And Miep is she's just like an ordinary young woman. She's like a young girl living in Amsterdam, partying too much. She's relatable in that one, and that it was the differences. It was just so different, a different telling of this story that I've seen before.
It's a great point. I also think what's interesting, I found all the cues, like having graffiti in English, having the Jewish star or the yellow star on her chest, not say Judah, which maybe young people don't understand. It's a Jew in English. I mean,
interestingly enough, when those first appeared on set, everybody was kind of like,
right.
It's more shocking.
You don't. We're all used to seeing Judah or Juden, but to see it in English was really startling.
I bet. So as a Jewish woman, let me ask you then, Belle, what was we were chatting a little bit behind the scenes about or backstage, how hard it is to revisit the work and watch yourself, but what might have been one of the hardest scenes, if you might, to film for you? As a Jewish woman, did anything really pull at you in particular?
I mean, listen, everyone kind of knows how this story ends, so I hope this isn't a
I don't think there are any spoilers.
Thanks. But it was when we were filmed. So after Liberation, episode 8 takes place. After that is basically the episode is following them kind of waiting to see, trying to find Anne and Margot.
Yeah.
And we filmed this scene it was set in the train station where everyone is coming back from the camps, and a lot of our SAs, our extras, had actually shaved their heads, and it just felt very visceral and real. And also by then so we were filming a scene where I delivered the news to my husband that actually Anne and Margot had died at Bergen-Belsen. And by then I had gotten to know the young actresses who were playing Anne and Margot so well.
Right.
I don't know, it really kind of hit home for me. Me and Tony had a little cry, didn't we?
Yeah.
During the scene. Yeah, but you know, it was all tough. It was all difficult. It was heavy stuff.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that I think about and how hard this is we think about the Shoah as this systematic annihilation of the Jewish people, which it was. But one of the things that you've done on this show, in the series, Joan, maybe I'll direct this question to you, is you've also broadened it a bit, and you touch on the persecution of gay people in the show and the institutionalized homophobia. Can you talk a little bit about the rationale behind including that in this?
Sure. Again, you'll see this when you watch the show, but Jan becomes involved in the resistance, and there was a bar, the first gay bar in Europe was called Café de Mange, and it was in Amsterdam, and it was sort of a hotbed of the resistance. And, you know, it's a gay bar, and they below had guns and stuff to fight the Germans. Above, they were hiding people. And there's a famous story, you know, the Dutch were so kind of organized, and they kept records of where everybody lived, where all the Jews lived. So they made it very easy for the Germans to find them. So the resistance members at Café de Mange decided that they would burn down the records office. And it was a famous action. And it was a bunch of these homosexuals and other people. But they burned down the records office partially, but they got arrested. And there's a famous, beautiful quote where the sort of leader of this action said, named Willem Arandius, said, "Let it be known that homosexuals are not cowards." And Miep and Jan, so like Anne Frank was one person who was hiding in Amsterdam among many, Miep and Jan were, you know, Miep was one person who was resisting. And we really felt it was important to sort of show the depth of the resistance in Amsterdam. And so that was one story we wanted to tell. So we have Jan, her husband, you know, we know he wasn't part of that action, but we know that he was a social worker, and we know the kinds of work social workers were doing in the resistance. So we sort of put him next to that action. We know that maybe he knew about it. So as you'll see when you watch the show, starting Monday, on Nat Geo, and then on Hulu and Disney Plus the next day. Anyway, I'm joking. But you'll see that we did try to incorporate that was one story of other people who were resisting.
You obviously, when you're researching, we researched this for about 5 years, and when you're reading all of this material, there are just certain things that jump out at you. And when we read about Willem and about Café de Mange, we were like, that's so compelling. We have to find a way to include that in the series, because we know that Miep and Jan were hiding and helping other people as well as the Franks.
That's the amazing thing, is that what we know about Miep, we know from Anne's diary, right? And Anne didn't know that Miep was hiding other people in and around Amsterdam while she was hiding them, because Miep couldn't tell them. So when we started doing our research, it blew our minds that Miep and Jan are going upstairs, they're offering food and a kind word, and then they're going downstairs and sort of doing all this other stuff, keeping secrets from the Franks and keeping secrets from one another. So it's really this sort of, you know, story of what's happening on one side of the bookcase and what's happening on the other side. I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? I always do that.
Not the first time.
Well, then let me ask a question to all three of you, actually. So you're making this series about a time seems far, far away, and yet you're doing it today in the shadow of this rise of anti-Semitism. You know, I'm sure from the ADL data, we are seeing historic numbers that the attitudes are going in the wrong direction, the number of anti-Jewish acts. Every year we hit a new high watermark. What was it like to make this show, to do this project in the shadow of this time?
I have to say, like, obviously filming this show for 5 months, and it's about a city under Nazi occupation, so there's a lot of like Nazi rhetoric in the script, because there had to be, because we were showing that part of it.
Yeah.
But then when all that Kanye stuff was happening,
Right.
and I was reading the same rhetoric by like a pop star on his Twitter feed, and it was very unsettling and freaky. And I don't know, like, I've experienced anti-Semitism at points in my life, like as a kid and in school and stuff, but that was maybe one of the most odd and unsettling moments for me in my life of experiencing anti-Semitism. And I guess it makes, it's sad, but makes our show so much more timely.
So timely.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so great that these guys have chosen to use this kind of modern tone in our show, because it does just put you in the now, rather than you just thinking about, oh, that was a time when people were anti-Semitic like 80 years ago. Like it really immediately makes you relate it to the now.
That's such a great point about that creative choice that you made feels so appropriate and almost urgent now. So for both of you, talk to us about what that was like.
Well, I think that I grew up in a generation of people who believed that we had learned the lessons of the 40s and that was behind us. And we were on our trajectory to a more just world. But to now see anti-Semitism that is so bald, there is no cover on it, it is just out there, is really shocking. And if we've learned anything, it's to not take it lightly, to not laugh at it, to not think it's a bunch of crazy yahoos, to fight against it, and to believe that we all, in our own way, have to stop it at its source. When we hear it, we confront it immediately.
Joan, do you want to elaborate on that at all?
Well, Tony always talks about how Miep and Jan and the Franks, when they were, before the war, they lived in a modern world. Amsterdam had, composers and concerts and art, and they had washing machines and refrigerators, and they couldn't believe in their modern world that this was really happening. And so when we were writing the show, how often do we all go, is this happening? Is this real? And I could really relate to that, the sort of, people say, why didn't the Franks get out? I think there probably was a lot of people going, he's going to skip this, he won't, and this is stuff we can really relate to, this idea of, in our world where we're all so smart and we know the lessons of history, how can we be repeating them? And, just in terms of working on this, it's really easy to feel hopeless and cynical. And, working on this was sort of like a balm to my soul, because Miep was really this person who just did the right thing, and she's a real inspiration.
Goodness, such a powerful story, and I think all of us feel lucky to have the opportunity just to witness this. We can't wait to watch it on Monday night. Give us in like 30 seconds what you might suggest is the one takeaway for like my 13-year-old when he watches it.
Miep's mantra until the day she died was, don't put me on a pedestal, don't call me a hero, like you don't have to be special in order to help others. You can be like me, we all have the good inside of us, like it's hardwired into us to know the right thing to do, and I think, we can all be a little bit more Miep.
Joan or Tony, do you want to build?
We're happy to be, supported by the reach of Disney Plus because we're going to be able to be in so many homes. And for me, I love the idea of families viewing this together and having conversations about it. You know, our 20-year-old watched it and she kept turning to us going, did that really happen?
Right.
And it's important to say, it really happened. These were real people, and we have to tell their stories well.
And the last thing I would say is the other thing about the reach of Disney Plus is, ideally, we're going to be getting into some homes where perhaps the parents won't know that their children are watching this, but their children will watch it, and it might have an effect. And I think that's, we all ask what we can do in our own way, and for Joan and I, we are privileged enough to be in a position where we can tell stories and have those stories come into people's living rooms. And that doesn't prevent us from taking other actions, but this is definitely something that we're very proud of and hope that you guys will get the word out and share it with people, because I think it would be great to get as many people to see it, especially now, as possible.
Well, you've got the right audience here for that. So unfortunately, we're out of time. But I want to just say to Belle and to Joan and to Tony, thank you so much. Thank you for your vision. Really, I mean, in bringing this story, having the vision to do it and to bring it to life in this way is incredible. Belle, thank you for the gift of your performance, which is just such an inspiration. And thank you to Nat Geo and to Disney Plus. Like you said, Tony, this is going to be spread broadly, spread widely, and I hope that ADL will be a part of that, because more than ever, the message of Shine a Light needs to be heard. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.